Well, let's unpack this. Close your eyes for a second and imagine walking into a place where time feels like it simply stopped.
Mm-hmm.
You're surrounded by buildings that stand against the elements, their windows staring like empty eyes.
Mm-hmm.
The wind whispers through structures that once bustled with noise and life.
Yeah.
You're not seeing spectral ghosts, necessarily, but the undeniable echoes of lives lived, communities built, and dreams both realized and sometimes profoundly lost.
That's a powerful image.
That potent, slightly eerie feeling is what draws us to ghost towns. And today we're doing a deep dive, specifically into the ghost towns of Utah.
Right.
These are places scattered across some of the state's most dramatic landscapes, each holding incredible, often surprising stories.
You provided us with a fantastic collection of sources for this. Articles, research, your own notes. It's a real treasure trove covering the histories, the exact locations, some of the lingering mysteries or folklore, and what these places look like now.
Exactly. So, our mission with this deep dive is to dig into that stack of material, pull out the most compelling nuggets, figure out why these communities faded away, because it's rarely just one reason.
Almost never.
Right. And understand what their remnants tell us about the sheer ambition and the immense challenges of settling the American West. It's about taking a shortcut to being well-informed, finding those surprising facts, and getting those aha moments about Utah's quieter yet deeply significant history.
Right. Utah is famous for its stunning natural beauty, the parks, the mountains. But tucked away, often in those very same dramatic settings, are these silent testaments to intense human ambition and struggle. They are just as much a part of the landscape story.
Absolutely. They aren't just forgotten ruins. They're chapters in a much larger story about persistence, technology, nature's power, and economic tides. So let's jump in with one that's probably Utah's most photographed ghost town, and partly thanks to Hollywood, which is Grafton.
Grafton. Its story is a really powerful early example of pioneer perseverance against brutal natural odds. It was founded around 1859 by Mormon pioneers. The initial call was to try and grow crops like cotton in southern Utah's challenging climate.
And the Virgin River made it clear from the start that it was going to be a difficult relationship.
It did. The very first settlement just downstream was completely wiped away by a flood in 1862.
Wow.
So they had to pick up and move, literally rebuilding the town slightly upstream. And the river just kept being a relentless problem for agriculture there.
I saw in the sources that conflict added another layer of instability, too.
It did. The Black Hawk War in 1866 brought raids and uncertainty, forcing a temporary evacuation of the settlement.
Right.
You combine that constant battle with the river, the limited amount of truly arable land, and the sheer isolation. You see why sustained large-scale life there was just a continuous struggle for generations. Many families eventually ended up moving to the slightly more established community of Rockville nearby.
So despite rebuilding after floods, facing conflict, their numbers just slowly dwindled over time until the last few residents finally left around, was it 1944?
Around then, yes.
It really speaks to an incredible tenacity, even if they didn't ultimately win against the environment.
That level of persistence in the face of repeated setbacks is genuinely remarkable. Grafton is located southwest of Zion National Park, easily accessible via Rockville.
Okay.
Its proximity to Zion definitely makes it much more visited than many other remote ghost towns.
And I imagine that quiet, almost surreal desolation you find near Zion also lends itself to ghost stories. Your sources mention Grafton is considered by some to be Utah's most haunted ghost town.
That seems to be the reputation, yes. There are reports of an eerie tranquility, strange noises, even apparitions of settlers seen in the area.
Really?
Uh-huh. The old, weathered cemetery there, with headstones dating back to 1860 and quite a few unmarked graves, definitely adds to that mystique and sense of lingering presence. You feel the history very strongly there.
One of the striking things about Grafton today is that it's actually quite well preserved, not just a pile of rubble.
That's thanks in large part to the Grafton Heritage Partnership, which formed in 1997. They've been absolutely crucial in saving and restoring some of the key buildings.
That's agreed.
When you visit, you can see 5 main structures still standing. The impressive 2-story schoolhouse, which also served as the church, a large barn, and 3 restored pioneer homes. The Ruby Rose, Louisa Marie Russell, and Alonzo Russell homes.
And you can actually go inside some of those homes, which is such a rare treat at a ghost town, and lets you really imagine what life was like there.
It makes a huge difference. Historical signage helps you understand who lived where and the history. There's no admission fee to visit, but you have to be totally self-sufficient, no services out there.
Right. Pack it in, pack it out.
Exactly. It's also listed on the National Register of Historic Places, recognizing its significant historical value.
But you mentioned Hollywood earlier. Its most unique factor, the thing that honestly put it on the map for many people who aren't deep into Utah history, is its cinematic legacy.
Oh, absolutely. Grafton has been used as a film backdrop since the late 1920s for westerns like in Old Arizona and Ramrod, but the really big one, the reason most people recognize it, is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid from 1969.
That iconic bicycle scene. I remember seeing that schoolhouse and thinking, where in the world is that?
That's the one. The schoolhouse and the Alonzo Russell home are prominently featured in that sequence. It's also been used in more recent films and TV shows like Electric Children and some documentary series about ghost towns.
That cinematic fame has really shaped its identity, hasn't it? It's not just a historical site anymore. It's this recognizable cultural landmark, a piece of film history. I imagine that helps with preservation efforts, too, attracting more attention and visitors.
It undoubtedly does. It gives Grafton a layer of cultural resonance that goes beyond its original story as a pioneer settlement. It's a powerful example of how a place's afterlife can take unexpected turns.
Okay, let's move from the picturesque, albeit haunted, charm of Grafton to a place known for being considerably less charming. Let's talk about Frisco.
Frisco, often described as the wildest mining town in the West. This was a classic, intense silver boom town located in Beaver County. Its existence was completely tied to the discovery of the incredibly rich Horn silver mine around 1875.
And while this sounds like the sources aren't exaggerating,
Not at all. At its absolute peak, maybe 4,000 to 6,000 people crammed into that canyon in 1885.
6,000, wow.
And it was utterly notorious for its lawlessness. Daily brawls were common, and there were upwards of 20 saloons catering to the miners.
21, I think one source said.
Could be 21, yeah. The legend of Sheriff Pearson is a testament to its violence. They say he had a rather direct approach to justice that sometimes involved a meat wagon for carrying away the casualties of shootouts.
A place where you literally might die with your boots on.
Precisely. It was a volatile, dangerous environment driven by the frenzied pursuit of wealth. But the decline started not with another gunfight, but something structural. A mine collapse.
The Horn silver mine caved in 1885. I read that miraculously nobody was killed because the foreman had a premonition and kept the shift out of the mine that day.
An astonishing piece of luck in a town defined by misfortune. But even without fatalities, that collapse marked the beginning of the end for the major operation. The ore eventually gave out, the miners left, and by the 1920s, Frisco was essentially abandoned.
Classic boom and bust.
Textbook example of the intense boom and bust cycle of hard rock mining in the West.
Frisco is located in Beaver County, out west of Milford at the base of the San Francisco Mountains.
Yes, accessible via State Route 21. And that violent, intense history naturally fuels its spectral side.
I imagine the cemetery must be a focal point for the stories.
The Frisco Cemetery is reputedly one of the largest of its kind in the state, supposedly filled with those who, as you said, died with their boots on.
Right.
But the sources also point out the surprisingly large number of children's graves, which raises poignant questions about epidemics or other nonviolent hardships alongside the famous gunfights.
So, what's left to see out at Frisco today?
The most prominent and enduring remnants are 5 large beehive-shaped charcoal kilns. These were absolutely essential for producing the charcoal needed to fuel the smelters that process the ore.
Okay.
They're incredibly sturdy and, like Grafton, listed on the National Register.
They are the most iconic link to its industrial past, standing there on the landscape.
They survived because they're built of stone, unlike most of the wooden town buildings, which are long gone. You'll find scattered mining equipment and foundations. It's important for visitors to know much of the surrounding land is private property, and there are genuine hazards like unmarked or unstable mine shafts.
Gotta be careful.
Respect is key.
And beyond the immediate ruins, it's located in the Great Basin National Heritage Area, offering access to outdoor activities like the Frisco Peak Trail.
Right. But those kilns really are the symbol of Frisco, powerful industrial artifacts that speak to the scale and intensity of the operation and the support infrastructure required way out there.
Let's head further south now to Silver Reef, a town whose boom was based on a geological phenomenon that initially seemed impossible.
Silver Reef. Its existence was thanks to a truly unique geological circumstance: the discovery of significant silver deposits found within sandstone. John Kemble made an initial discovery in 1866, but it wasn't until around 1875 that it really took off.
Silver in sandstone. That sounds completely counterintuitive for how silver usually formed.
It absolutely was. Geologists at the time were highly skeptical, believing silver was only found in hard rock veins. But this was a rare exception, and it was rich enough to fuel a massive boom.
Wow.
The town grew incredibly rapidly, becoming the most populous settlement in southern Utah by the late 1870s, with between 2,000 and 2,500 residents.
I saw mentions of a mile-long main street with 9 grocery stores, 6 saloons, a Wells Fargo office. It sounds like a truly vibrant, if perhaps rowdy, boomtown.
It was bustling, but like many boom towns driven by a single resource, its prosperity was relatively short-lived. A combination of factors hit: a global decline in silver prices, increasing problems with mine flooding, and a major fire in 1880 that wiped out much of the business district.
Oh, no.
This led to a rapid decline by the late 1880s. Most mining activity ceased by 1891, and the town was largely abandoned by 1900, with many of the salvageable buildings literally moved down the road to the town of Leeds.
So the improbable discovery was its defining characteristic, followed by that classic pattern of rapid rise and swift, dramatic fall. Silver Reef is located northeast of St. George, right near Leeds, and it's quite accessible from I-15.
That's correct. You can get there from exits 22 or 23. And like many old mining sites, its history contributes to spectral tales.
The sources mention stories tied to the mines and the graveyard.
Yes, the graveyard is said to be the final resting place for individuals who perhaps didn't settle their disputes amicably, meeting their end the Western way. And the legends surrounding the initial silver discovery itself have a touch of the mystical tales of John Kemble, seeing silver gleam from overheated rock, or the prospector Metalliferous Murphy trekking fragments from a grindstone.
Huh. Metalliferous Murphy.
Right. There were also documented tensions during labor disputes, including foremen being run out of town or even tarred and feathered, suggesting a volatile atmosphere that could fuel stories.
Silver Reef today has a really unique situation compared to many ghost towns.
It does. The original Wells Fargo office is remarkably preserved and serves as the Silver Reef Museum. They've done a fantastic job preserving the history with exhibits, guided tours, even a recreated mine tunnel in the basement.
That's cool.
The museum building itself is listed on the National and Utah state registers. You can also still see remnants like the old stone jail, the Rice Bank building, some stone kilns, building foundations, and the Catholic and Protestant cemeteries.
But access is a bit tricky now because of modern development.
Precisely. The area where the original Main Street ran is now part of an upscale residential community, and much of that is on private drives, limiting casual public access to those specific areas.
Okay.
However, there are still accessible areas, particularly around the museum and trails leading to nearby points of interest, like an outlook or a dinosaur track site accessible from the Red Cliffs campground area. There is an admission fee for the museum itself.
It's a fascinating juxtaposition. Historical preservation efforts literally side by side with modern development that's built over some of the historic footprint.
It really is. It shows how these landscapes continue to be lived on and reshaped, sometimes absorbing the past rather than leaving it isolated. But the key unique fact that silver springing from sandstone, a geological rarity, is what made it all possible.
And the museum really keeps that incredible origin story alive, along with the vibrant history of the town, with themed events and passionate docents.
It's a vital link to the past, ensuring the story isn't lost, especially with the physical remnants less accessible in places.
Okay, our next town has a particular dramatic and relatively recent end. Thistle.
Thistle's story stands apart from the others. It wasn't primarily a mining or agricultural town, but a railroad town in Spanish Fork Canyon in Utah County.
Right.
It was established around 1878 by the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad, the DNRGW, specifically as a service and refueling point for their steam locomotives, strategically located near river confluences.
It grew to a decent size at its peak.
Yes, reaching maybe 600 people around 1917. Like many railroad towns, its importance began to wane with the nationwide shift from steam to diesel locomotives, which didn't need water stocks as frequently.
Made sense.
By early 1983, the population was down to only about 50 residents in 24 homes.
And then nature delivered the final, swift, and incredibly visible blow.
In April 1983, a period of record snowpack followed by heavy rain caused a massive earthflow landslide downstream in the canyon. It moved incredibly slowly but relentlessly, completely damming the Spanish Fork River. There was warning, allowing residents to be evacuated, but the rising water had nowhere to go and simply inundated the town.
It became the most costly landslide in United States history at the time.
It was, and Utah's first designated presidential disaster area. The story is incredibly distinct because it wasn't a slow economic fade or a fire. It was a sudden physical erasure by geological forces, visible to anyone who passed through the canyon.
That suddenness, the visible loss, it must create a different kind of ghostly feeling than a slow abandonment.
It absolutely does. The sources describe the site as spine-tingling. While there aren't traditional ghost stories about specific people, there's a palpable sense of a community abruptly wiped away.
Yeah.
Locals might feel the land holds the painful memory of that sudden loss. It's a more modern environmental haunting, you could say.
And today, physically, there's not much left to see of the town itself, right?
Most of it is still either submerged beneath the water impounded by the landslide or was destroyed. The most iconic image is the partially sunken house that remained visible for years, though even that has continued to deteriorate.
I remember seeing pictures of that.
Yeah, you might spot rubble that was once parts of the schoolhouse or an old train machine shop, but access is very difficult or impossible due to the water, challenging terrain, and fencing.
The main transportation routes had to be completely rerouted.
Yes, U.S. Route 689 and the railroad line were both rebuilt on higher ground above the landslide and the new lake. But even with little you can physically walk through, Thistle remains a recognized name and a poignant landmark because of that dramatic story and its visibility from the highway and passing trains.
His primary identifier is undeniably that catastrophic 1983 landslide.
Yes, its scale and consequences were huge, not just locally, but for the entire Intermountain West, severing major rail and highway arteries for months. The story of the evacuation, the engineering efforts to mitigate the damage, and the sheer scale of the loss is a significant piece of modern Utah history.
Moving on to Mercer, a town with a tumultuous past that saw it rise from the ashes multiple times.
Mercer, located in Toole County, it's often called the Phoenix of gold mining towns, and for good reason. Its history is a series of booms, busts, and devastating fires. Yet the community showed incredible resilience.
It started life under a different name, Lewiston, back in the 1870s.
Right. Lewiston had an initial gold rush, then a silver boom, but by the 1880s it was a ghost town. Then in 1879, Ari Pinedo discovered a deposit of cinnabar there. He named his claim Mercer because he thought the cinnabar indicated mercury, which it does, but the value was actually in the low-grade gold mixed in with the complex ore.
But they couldn't get the gold out economically at first.
Exactly. Existing methods weren't efficient enough for that specific type of ore, so Mercer became another abandoned camp.
So how did it become the Phoenix? What brought it back to life?
The key was technological innovation in the early 1890s. A metallurgist named Gilbert S. Gill Payton successfully implemented the relatively new cyanide process to extract gold from Mercer's complex ore on a large scale.
Ah, the cyanide process.
This was actually the first successful large-scale commercial use of the cyanide process in the United States, and it absolutely revolutionized gold recovery globally.
So it wasn't just finding more ore, it was figuring out how to get the gold out of the ore they already had.
Precisely. That technological breakthrough fueled a second massive boom. The town exploded again, reaching a population of around 5,000 people.
5,000.
It was notable for its large Italian immigrant community and vibrant celebrations like Columbus Day. And despite facing major fires that leveled the town in 1896 and again in 1902, they rebuilt each time.
Incredible resilience. But even a Phoenix eventually faces its final decline.
Yes. The mines eventually closed by 1913, and Mercer was a ghost town again by 1925. There was a brief resurgence during the Depression in the 1930s, making it Utah's second largest gold producer for a period, but the final mining operations ceased by 1951.
Okay.
Later, modern mining companies extracted ore nearby from 1985 to 1997, but not from the historic town site itself.
Mercer is located in Toole County, on the south side of the Oquirrh Mountains, in what's now known as Manning Canyon, west of Cedar Fort.
Yes. And its traumatic history of booms, busts, and fires likely contributes to its spectral side.
I understand the Mercer Cemetery is where many of the stories are centered.
That seems to be the focus. It's reputed to be haunted, with reports of shadowy figures and even a phantom horseman seen near the graveyard.
Ooh.
The tumultuous history, the sudden deaths, the recurring destruction by fire, all of that would certainly fuel legends of lingering spirits.
In the present day, though, there's very little physically left of the town of Mercer.
Unfortunately, yes. Extensive modern mining operations in the area and subsequent reclamation efforts essentially scraped the historic town site to the ground.
Really? Just gone.
Pretty much. There are virtually no original town buildings left standing. The most significant survivor, and really the main point of access for visitors interested in the history, is the Mercure Cemetery, which is accessible via a trail. You can see some old mining tailings in the distance, but the modern mining area is on private property,
So its physical history was largely erased by later industrial activity.
which makes its story primarily preserved in historical records, old photos, and that isolated, poignant cemetery. It's a ghost town whose physical ghost has been nearly wiped away by later uses of the land.
But its contribution to mining history, that first successful cyanide process use, is huge.
It's arguably Mercure's most important legacy. That technological breakthrough was transformative for gold mining. The Golden Gate Mining Company there operated one of the largest cyanide mills of its time, designed by a young engineer named Daniel C. Jackling, who would go on to become a major figure in mining.
Interesting connection.
And the vibrant Italian community, with their unique cultural contributions like the band and celebrations, adds another fascinating layer to its story.
Let's head east now to Sego, a ghost town with an incredible mix of ancient history right nearby and a literally smoldering secret underground.
Sego, located in Grand County. Its history is tied to coal mining in Sego Canyon, within the Book Cliffs. Coal was discovered there in the late 1890s or early 1900s, leading to a settlement that went through a few names: Ballard, then Neslin by the American Fuel Company, and finally Sego in 1918, named after the Sego lily, Utah's state flower.
It sounds like the company allowed miners a certain amount of freedom there.
They did. Miners were allowed to build their own cabins and even dugouts into the canyon walls. At its peak, the town had between 200 and 500 people, producing significant amounts of coal daily.
Wow.
To get the coal out, they built the Ballard and Thompson Railroad, connecting Sego to Thompson Springs.
But like many isolated industrial towns, it faced numerous challenges.
Water was a constant issue, ironically alongside the threat of flash floods damaging the railroad line needed for transport. Labor issues, including strikes, were also frequent.
So, what eventually led to its abandonment?
A combination of factors. The mines becoming less profitable, fires damaging critical equipment in 1949, and the biggest one, the widespread adoption of diesel locomotives by railroads meant they needed far less coal for steam engines.
The diesel transition again.
Exactly. Operations basically ceased between 1947 and 1950, and the town was abandoned by 1955. A flash flood in the 1950s washed away even more of the remaining structures.
Sego is in Grand County, north of Thompson Springs, accessible from I-70.
Yes, you take exit 187 towards Thompson Springs and then head north on a paved road that turns to gravel. It's generally accessible with a low-clearance vehicle in good weather.
And its spectral side isn't just traditional ghost stories, but tied to the environment and its deep history.
That's what makes Sego so intriguing. While there aren't specific legends of ghostly miners, the most haunting elemental feature is a perpetually burning underground coal seam, reportedly smoldering for decades.
Still burning.
Apparently so. Sometimes you can see smoke rising from old mine shafts, which is incredibly eerie and feels like the earth itself is holding on to the town's industrial past.
A literal slow burn.
Exactly. And then, right there in the same canyon, is the Sego Canyon Rock Art Site, with incredible ancient petroglyphs and pictographs from the Fremont, Ute, and Barrier Canyon cultures.
Wow.
That adds this profound layer of human history and spiritual depth that predates the town by millennia.
The juxtaposition of ancient art and industrial ruins is truly powerful. What can visitors see of the ghost town today?
Visible remnants include the Stone American Fuel Company store building, pieces of the old wooden boarding house, though much has collapsed, scattered foundations, remnants of dugouts, and mining relics. Some homes were physically moved to Thompson Springs over the years. The mine entrances are sealed for safety. You can also still see parts of the old Ballard and Thompson Railroad grade and bridges.
And the rock art site is a major draw itself.
It is, with interpretive panels and facilities. The ghost town area is largely private property, but it's generally accessible for respectful driving and viewing from the road. There's camping allowed nearby, too. Sego is also listed on the National Register as the Ballard-Sego Coal Mine Historic District.
Okay.
Sadly, a fire in 1973, allegedly started by treasure hunters, destroyed more buildings.
Oh, that's terrible. The unique character of Sego really is that incredible juxtaposition of ancient human presence and relatively recent industrial collapse.
It tells a layered story of human interaction with this landscape over vast periods of time. It also had a diverse community of miners, Italian, African American, Japanese, Greek, and that burning coal seam is a very distinctive elemental symbol of the town's legacy and its interaction with the earth.
Let's go way out west now to Terrace, a vital railroad oasis built in the middle of the deep desert.
Terrace, located in Box Elder County. This was a really significant division point for the Central Pacific Railroad on the First Transcontinental Railroad. It was established on April 1st, 1869, just weeks before the Golden Spike ceremony at Promontory.
Building a functional town out there in the Great Salt Lake Desert must have been an incredible feat.
It was a massive undertaking. At its peak, it had a population of around 1,000 people. Crucially, this included a substantial number of Chinese railroad workers whose contributions were often overlooked and undercounted in the official histories.
Right.
For a desert town, it was remarkably well equipped. A large 16-stall roundhouse for locomotives, an 8-track switchyard, a general store, hotels, restaurants, even a library, an opera house, and a pleasure garden with imported trees.
Wow, an opera house.
Yeah, getting water there required building aqueducts and pipe systems.
It sounds like a true oasis, a testament to the railroad's power to create communities. But its fate was entirely sealed by the railroad, too.
Absolutely. Its purpose was purely functional for the railroad's steam engines. And its end came swiftly in 1904 when the Southern Pacific completed the Lucen Cutoff.
That was the bypass across the Great Salt Lake.
Exactly. That massive engineering project meant trains no longer needed to go all the way north around the lake and Promontory Summit. Terrace was simply bypassed.
Just like that.
The railroad facilities closed, the division point moved to Montello, Nevada, and many of the buildings were dismantled and physically relocated there. A fire around 1904 also helped seal its fate. The rail line itself through Terrace was officially abandoned and the tracks removed in 1942.
A classic, perhaps harsh, illustration of how shifts in technology and infrastructure can just leave the place behind. Terrace is way out in the western Box Elder County, deep in the Great Salt Lake Desert.
It is remote. You reach it via the Transcontinental Railroad Backcountry Byway, which follows the old grade. The vast, empty landscape is as much a part of the experience as the town remnants.
And the spectral side here often seems tied to that railroad history and specifically the Chinese workers.
Folklore from the area includes tales of the site being haunted by the sounds and voices of Chinese workers and reports of ghostly lights. Given their immense labor in building that line and the historical marginalization they faced, those stories feel incredibly poignant. Modern archaeological work at Terrace is specifically focused on uncovering evidence of the Chinese inhabitants' lives there, their living areas, their material culture, trying to recover their stories that weren't well documented in written records.
And the mention of a Buddhist ritual honoring ancestors suggests a living cultural connection to that history, not just abstract folklore.
It does. It highlights how the ghosts can represent not just spooky tales, but a deeper recognition of significant, sometimes painful historical presences that deserve to be remembered.
So out in that vast desert, what is there to see of Terrace today?
Very little that's still standing. The cemetery is there, but only about 3 headstones are still visible.
Only 3.
Yeah. You might find a pile of red bricks or the faint circular outline where the turntable for the roundhouse once was. The most significant visible feature is the old railroad grade itself, which cuts clearly across the landscape. It's part of the Central Pacific Railroad Grade Historic District, also on the National Register.
So it's less about exploring buildings and more about experiencing the landscape and the path of the railroad.
Absolutely. The Bureau of Land Management, the BLM, manages the area as part of the byway with some interpretive sites along the route, but there are no facilities at the Terrace site itself. You need to be fully self-sufficient.
Okay.
It's an experience of remoteness and the vastness of the achievement required to build a railroad across it. It's also crucial to respect the archaeological resources, leave any artifacts you might find.
A key beyond the dust fact is definitely that significant Chinese population and the ongoing efforts to uncover and highlight their history.
Their community had distinct areas for housing, even their own laundry, cookhouse, and Joss Sanctuary, a place for religious or spiritual practice. It's a vital, often overlooked part of the Transcontinental Railroad story.
Yeah.
And the town name, Terrace, actually comes from the ancient shorelines of Lake Bonneville, visible on the surrounding hills, linking the history to the deep geological past.
Next, a truly unique community founded not on natural resources or transportation needs, but entirely on faith.
Ayosepa.
Iosepa, located in Skull Valley in Toole County. This is an incredibly poignant and unique chapter in Utah history. It was founded in 1889 specifically for Polynesian converts to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, primarily Hawaiians, but also others who were seeking a place to gather closer to the LDS temples and church headquarters in Salt Lake City.
Named Iosepa, which is the Hawaiian form of Joseph, after Joseph Smith and Joseph F. Smith.
That's right. It was organized as a joint stock company, with the LDS Church owning the land initially. The first settlers arrived on August 28, 1889, a date still commemorated today as Hawaiian Pioneer Day in Utah.
Oh, interesting.
The community grew, reaching about 228 people by 1915.
They must have worked incredibly hard to make that desert valley habitable.
They truly transformed the landscape.
Hmm.
They established farms, raising lucerne, alfalfa, sugar beets, grains, potatoes, squash. They raised pigs and even tried cultivating fish in ponds they built.
Wow.
They constructed homes, a school, a store, and vital irrigation systems, bringing elements of their traditional Hawaiian culture and social structure to the grid layout common in Mormon settlements.
But despite their efforts, they faced immense hardships.
The environment itself was harsh, with extreme temperature swings. They struggled with crop failures. And devastatingly, they were hit hard by infectious diseases like whooping cough, smallpox, and diphtheria.
Oh, that's awful.
The cemetery at Iosepa holds many graves, particularly of children, tragically lost during those early years. There was even a minor leprosy outbreak in 1896, which led to the Iosepa residents being further isolated and facing social alienation fueled by negative press. It sounds like they endured immense challenges. But what makes Iosepa's ending so distinct is that it wasn't a failure.
That's exactly right. It wasn't a typical economic bust. While the settlement wasn't entirely self-sustaining and needed church support, its end came about because of a decision tied directly to their faith. In 1915, the LDS Church announced plans to build a temple in Laie, Hawaii, which would be the first temple in Polynesia. The church offered financial aid for the Iosepa residents to return to their homeland if they wished.
So the abandonment was a planned, collective, faith-driven relocation back to Hawaii.
Precisely. The vast majority chose to return, many eager to participate in the construction of the new temple and to be reunited with family and their cultural home. By January 1917, Iosepa was largely abandoned and the land was eventually sold. It's an incredibly poignant chapter, a testament to the power of faith and cultural ties guiding a community's decision over purely economic pressures.
The spectral side of Iosepa, then, isn't really about traditional ghosts, but something more profound.
It feels that way based on the sources. It's described as having a deep spiritual and cultural resonance. The large number of graves from the early hardships does create a somber, reflective atmosphere. But there's a fascinating artifact, a large limestone slab known as the Story Rock.
Story Rock?
Yeah. It has petroglyphs and carvings made by the residents depicting island scenes like palm trees, a canoe, a turtle, and ocean creatures.
Is that speculated to be a way they preserved their heritage or expressed homesickness?
That's the strong speculation, perhaps teaching the younger generation about their homeland, or simply a way to connect with their origins while in the desert. The location of this rock is often kept discreet to protect it.
Right.
More recently, the vandalism of Tiki's carvings, placed there in 2015 as cultural guardians or protectors, highlights the ongoing cultural and religious sensitivities tied to the site and traditional beliefs.
In the present day, what remains at Iosepa?
The primary and most significant remnant is the well-maintained cemetery, which was listed on the National Register in 1971. The site has been improved over the years with a pavilion, restrooms, historical markers, and a monument erected in 1989.
Okay.
Little else remains of the actual town structures, just some foundations, scattered artifacts, and notably some isolated fire hydrants sticking out of the ground as silent sentinels.
Fire hydrants, huh?
Yeah. The land is now private ranch property, but public access to the cemetery is allowed.
But like Grafton, it has a vibrant, living connection today.
It absolutely does. The Iosepa Historical Association actively preserves the history and organizes an annual Memorial Day gathering at the cemetery. It's a major event that draws many descendants of the original settlers for alua and cultural activities.
That's wonderful.
It ensures Iosepa isn't just a forgotten historical footnote, but a place of remembrance and vibrant cultural connection for a living community.
It's a truly unique and powerful story within the history of Western settlement. A Polynesian colony in the desert, driven by faith and community rather than resources.
Adapting their customs, celebrating their own Pioneer Day, demonstrating incredible perseverance against harsh environmental and social challenges. It's a powerful story of resilience, cultural identity, and community ties overriding typical drivers of settlement and abandonment.
Next, Old Irontown, a site that speaks to early pioneer industrial ambition, even if it didn't last long.
Old Irontown, located in Iron County. This is a tangible, physical reminder of the early, ambitious Mormon pioneer efforts to achieve industrial self-sufficiency in Utah. It was the second major attempt to establish an iron industry, founded in 1868, after earlier efforts near Cedar City in the 1850s didn't pan out.
This effort was directly spurred by Brigham Young's vision for economic independence, right?
Precisely. The goal was to produce iron domestically to avoid relying on expensive imports. The settlement grew quickly, reaching nearly 100 residents within 2 years. They rapidly developed the necessary infrastructure, a schoolhouse, a blacksmith shop, and crucially, charcoal furnaces. Those are the kilns and a foundry.
And they were successful, at least initially, in producing iron.
They were. By 1874, they were producing around 400 pounds of pig iron daily. But like many early industrial efforts on the frontier, its prosperity was short-lived, lasting less than a decade before it was largely abandoned by 1876.
What led to its relatively quick failure?
Several factors combined. The nationwide panic of 1873 caused an economic downturn that hurt markets. There was a lack of suitable or cost-effective transportation to get the iron to population centers. And pressure on the LDS Church from anti-polygamy legislation, like the Edmunds-Tucker Act, likely diverted resources and focus away from such ambitious, non-essential economic projects.
Right. Bigger priorities emerged. So its significance today is primarily as a remarkably well-preserved archaeological site representing that determined pursuit of an independent industrial base. And its failure highlights the immense economic and logistical obstacles faced on the frontier.
Exactly. It's a powerful testament to that ambition, but also the harsh realities that often made such dreams incredibly difficult to sustain.
Old Irontown is located west of Cedar City, within the Dixie National Forest.
Accessible via State Route 56 and then a gravel road, Old Irontown Road. Unlike some of the other towns we've discussed, it's not particularly known for specific ghost stories or paranormal legends in the traditional sense.
Its ghostly character comes purely from the historical echoes of past labor and ambition.
Right. It evokes the lives and work of the people who tried to forge an industry there through its physical remains. While the nearby Mountain Meadows Massacre site does have associated paranormal claims, those are distinct from Old Irontown itself.
Good clarification. And what remains at Old Irontown is relatively substantial and quite iconic.
It is. The most recognizable structure is the distinctive beehive-shaped charcoal kiln. It's incredibly well preserved and visually striking.
Those kilns again?
Yeah. You can also see the remains of an arostra, that's a primitive ore-grinding mill, parts of the foundry chimney, and the stone foundations of buildings like the schoolhouse and blacksmith shop.
The site is managed, which helps with preservation.
Yes. It's fenced and maintained by the Sons of Utah Pioneers. It's open year-round during daylight hours with no admission fee. Basic amenities like restrooms and a picnic area are available, though there's no staff on site. There are short interpretive trails explaining the ruins and leading to remnants of pioneer cabins. It was listed on the National Register quite early in 1971.
Sounds like you can really get a sense of the physical layout and the scale of the operation there. And seeing modern iron mining visible from the highway nearby must create an interesting then and now perspective.
It really does. It highlights the area's enduring geological richness and how the pursuit of iron ore has evolved from those early, challenging pioneer efforts to modern industrial scale. The charcoal production using those kilns from local juniper and pinyon was a critical, resourceful piece of their operation.
Almost done. Let's look at Cisco, a town whose fate was entirely tied to transportation routes, which found a strange afterlife as a cinematic backdrop.
Cisco, in Grand County. Its story is a clear illustration of how changes in transportation infrastructure can create and then kill a community. Its origins around the 1880s were purely functional. It was a vital water refilling station for the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad's steam locomotives.
So it grew up serving the needs of the railroad and its travelers.
Exactly. Businesses like saloons, hotels, stores, and restaurants sprang up to serve the crews and passengers. It also became a significant provisioning and shipping hub for local ranchers and herders, notably a major sheep shearing center.
Okay.
Then, oil and gas discovery in 1924 brought another layer of growth, making it Utah's largest oil producer for a period. It supported a post office, store, and schoolhouse, reaching a population of maybe 200 in the 1940s.
But the shift from steam to diesel locomotives killed the water stop business.
That was the first blow, reducing its importance to the railroad. There was a temporary reprieve with the uranium and vanadium mining boom in the area, but the decisive event was the construction of Interstate 70 in the 1970s.
I-70 completely bypassed the town, following a different route than the old U.S. Route 650.
That was it. With highway commerce gone and the railroad needs diminished, the businesses withered and the town was abandoned. It's a classic case of being left behind by progress in transportation.
Cisco is located in Grand County, right near the junction of State Route 128 and I-70, making it very easy to access.
It is perhaps the most accessible ghost town we're discussing today.
And its spectral side seems less about specific traditional ghosts and more about the powerful atmosphere of desolation and decay.
That's the feeling it evokes today. It looks, frankly, like something out of a scary movie, as one source put it.
Yeah, I've seen pictures.
The sheer desolation, the decay, and the history of vandalism contribute to that haunting quality. The country singer Johnny Cash even captured that fading existence in his 1967 song, Cisco Clifton's Fillin' Station. Modern folklore about the place probably stems more from its cinematic appearances and its desolate appearance.
And in the present day, what is there to see? I know it's notoriously dilapidated.
It's known for being haunting, sun-bleached remnants empty, falling down buildings that were once the store or post office, or rusting cars, general junk scattered around. It has suffered heavily from vandalism precisely because it's so accessible right off the highway, but there's a surprising twist.
I read about the artist who moved there.
Yes, the artist Eileen Musa resides there. She's been working on restoring some of the structures and has even started an artist residency program. A small store, Buzzard's Belly General Store, sometimes operates.
Really?
Uh-huh. There are a few other residents, some buildings have been fixed up. Even the old post office occasionally functions as an Airbnb.
So its physical decay, its stark aesthetic, has actually become an asset, drawing artists and filmmakers.
It's a fascinating evolution. Its desolate appearance has become a sort of symbolic landscape, and its cinematic exposure is a huge part of its identity now. It was a key backdrop for the opening and closing scenes of the film Vanishing Point in 1971, appeared in Thelma and Louise, though the buildings used then are gone now, and Don't Come Knocking in 2005. Its history is a laid story railroad, livestock, oil and gas, highway tourism, and now artistic and symbolic resonance. Even new oil and gas wells drilled in the area around 2005 show that the underlying resources still draw interest.
Finally, let's talk about Ophir, often described as a living ghost town.
Ophir, located in Ophir Canyon in Tooele County. It's distinct because while it experienced a major decline and looks like a ghost town in many respects, it has managed to retain a small population and preserve some of its key historic buildings. It's a community that still exists amidst the relics of its past boom.
It was founded in 1870 after mineral discoveries, drawing people from nearby military camps.
Yes, soldiers from Camp Douglas and local prospectors knew about the metals in the Ochre Mountains. The Ophir mining district and the town were established in 1870. The name Ophir comes from the biblical land known for gold, reflecting the hopes of the prospector.
It makes sense.
Though another story suggests a miner exclaimed, "Oh, for God's sake," upon seeing the rich ore, and the name stuck.
Huh. Could be. It sounds like it had a huge boom.
It did, primarily in the 1870s with incredibly rich silver ores. At its peak, Ophir reportedly had a population of around 6,000 people.
6,000 again.
Yeah. It was a bustling classic mining camp with saloons, dance halls, gambling houses, but also 2 schools, theaters, numerous stores, a newspaper, stagecoach lines, and eventually even a railroad spur. Between 1870 and 1900, they mined millions of dollars worth of lead, silver, and zinc.
So mining continued intermittently, but the population obviously dropped dramatically.
Yes, population fluctuated hugely, directly tracking the cycles of mining activity. It was actually one of Utah's smallest incorporated towns for a while, but it eventually disincorporated in 2016 because it no longer had enough residents willing or able to form a local government. It's now a census-designated place.
Okay. Ophir is in Tooele County, up in Ophir Canyon on the west slope of the Ochre Mountains.
Correct. It even has its own ZIP code still.
Any specific spectral site or folklore tied to Ophir itself?
The folklore in the area is more centered on the surrounding Ochre Mountains, like the well-known legend of the Lost Soldier Ledge.
Ah, the Lost Mine story.
Exactly. The story goes that a soldier found a incredibly rich gold outcrop high in the mountains marked a B on a tree, but was killed before he could lead anyone back to it, and the ledge has never been relocated. It's a classic lost mine legend for the region. The sources don't highlight prominent, specific paranormal claims directly tied to the town site of Ophir itself. Its character is defined by its preserved history.
And that's what makes it a living ghost town, the well-preserved historic core.
That's its key feature. The Ophir Historic District is notable for maintaining its 19th century buildings. You can see the old schoolhouse, the church, parts of the old hotel, and original homes and businesses still standing along what was the main street.
Nice.
There's also the Ophir Museum, which provides historical context and artifacts.
It sounds like it offers a much more complete visual record of a mining town than many others.
It absolutely does. Preservation efforts over the years have kept the core intact, allowing visitors to walk through and get a real sense of what a busy mining town might have looked and felt like. Preservation Utah even offers tour apps or guided tours sometimes.
Okay.
It's a very charming, picturesque setting. There's also a Bureau of Land Management campground nearby, Ophir Creek, offering recreation.
So its status as a small existing community amidst these relics is quite unique.
It offers a different kind of historical experience. You see the past not just in ruins, but in structures still cared for, alongside modern life, albeit on a very small scale.
Wow. We've really covered a lot of ground, haven't we? From Grafton's pioneer perseverance and cinematic afterlife to Frisco's wild boom and charcoal kilns, Silver Reef's silver and sandstone anomaly, Thistle's dramatic drowning by a landslide, Mercury's multiple fiery rebirths and technological revolution.
Sago's ancient art beside coal ruins and a burning seam, Terrace's crucial but bypass railroad oasis and its Chinese workers, Ayosepa's unique, faith-driven desert haven and its poignant return home, Old Irontown's ambitious but failed industrial experiment, and Ophir's rich mining past that endures as a living ghost town.
Yeah.
Each of these towns became ghosts for such different, distinct reasons. Relentless floods, conflict, economic collapses, mine disasters, fundamental technological shifts in transportation or mining, sudden catastrophic landslides, a planned collective relocation driven by faith, ambitious industrial failures, or simply the volatile nature of boom and bust resource extraction cycles.
And the ghosts themselves are varied too, not just spectral apparitions, but the echoes of pioneers, miners, railroad workers, diverse immigrant communities, ancient peoples who left their mark, and even the sheer powerful force of nature or the relentless march of technological progress itself.
And the physical remnants they've left behind range just as widely, from relatively well-preserved museums and interpreted ruins where you can walk through buildings, to scattered foundations in places like Terrace or Mercer where barely anything stands, forcing their stories to be told more through the landscape, archaeological work, and historical records.
Exploring these Utah ghost towns from the sources you provided really is a journey to the fundamental human stories behind the history of the American West. They are stories of hope, of immense struggle, innovation, community building, adaptation, and ultimately the relentless passage of time and the power of forces beyond human control. They are powerful, tangible reminders of just how conditional and challenging settlement in the face of formidable environmental and economic forces could be.
They are. And if these places, founded for such distinct purposes, whether it was faith, the extraction of valuable resources, or serving critical transportation routes and ultimately meeting such varied ends, whether it was a natural disaster, economic collapse, technological obsolescence, or even a planned return to a spiritual homeland, if they can leave such enduring, unique imprints on the landscape and in our collective memory.
What does that tell you about the deep, complex relationship between human endeavor, the raw power of the environment, and the long, fascinating arc of history?